I learned this the hard way long before anyone called me elite or disciplined. Back then, I was just a young SEAL on my first deployment, standing in the back of a helicopter with my heart pounding so loud I could hear it through the headset. The doors opened, the night air hit my face, and in that moment, I realized something that would shape the rest of my life. Most people don't fail because they're weak. They fail because they step into the fight without a mission plan. And when you do that in my world, you don't just fail, you die. I remember that mission vividly. We had intel that shifted 3 times in 6 hours. Every time we thought we had the target's location nailed down, new information came through. One building, then two, then a whole block. I watched another unit on the ground scrambling, trying to improvise. No plan, no clarity, no structure, just panic. When the first shots cracked through the night, that chaos cost them precious seconds they never got back, seconds that meant injuries and almost something worse. That was the moment I understood the truth. The world doesn't care how tough you think you are. It cares whether you're prepared. People think danger is loud, dramatic, obvious, but the real danger is walking into your day with no map, no objective, no intention. You don't notice the threat until it's already too late. That's why civilians fail, not because they lack strength or talent, but because they move through life like that team on the ground, reacting instead of leading, hoping instead of executing. And hope without a plan is just fear wearing a mask. But here's the part most people never hear. When you do have a plan, everything changes. Fear turns into focus, chaos turns into clarity, adrenaline turns into action. On that same mission, my team sat in total silence for minutes before the green light. You could hear the hum of the rotors shaking through the fuselage. Every one of us knew what we were walking into, not because we were fearless, but because we had rehearsed every step, every contingency, every failure point until the plan lived in our bones. That's what allowed us to move with precision while everything around us exploded into noise and confusion. That's what brought us home. A Harvard leadership review found that teams with a clear, simple mission plan outperform others by more than 60%, even under intense stress. I didn't need the study, I lived it, but it's good for you to know this isn't just Navy SEAL folklore. Planning isn't motivation, it's mechanics, it's survival, it's the difference between wandering and winning. And that brings me to the reason you're here. When you saw the words, most people don't fail, they don't plan, something inside you recognized the truth. Maybe you've been operating without a mission. Maybe you've been relying on willpower to drag you through days that feel heavier than they should. Or maybe you're standing at the edge of a goal, a dream, a new chapter, and you feel the same fear I felt in the back of that helicopter. Good, because fear is a signal. It tells you this matters, and the antidote to fear isn't courage, it's preparation. When I say follow my mission, I'm not asking you to become a soldier. I'm asking you to live with intention, to move through your day like it's terrain that needs to be navigated, not endured, to stop hoping things will work out and start designing the outcome you want. If you give me your attention for the next few minutes, I'll show you the exact system that kept me alive in war zones and made me effective in life. Not motivation, not hype, a mission plan, the kind that turns ordinary people into forces of nature, and we begin right now. When I left the military, people assumed the scariest part of my life was behind me: combat, high pressure missions, nights where every sound could mean the difference between seeing tomorrow or not. But it didn't take long for me to realize something unsettling. The most dangerous battlefield isn't out there in some foreign country, it's right here in civilian life. And the enemy is invisible, it's drifting. It's waking up with no plan, no direction, no mission. Most people think they're safe because bullets aren't flying. They have no idea how much damage a directionless life can do. In the teams, drifting for even 1 second can get you killed. But in civilian life, drifting kills you slowly, quietly. It erodes your confidence, your momentum, your sense of purpose. You don't notice the danger until you look back and realize you've lost months, maybe years, because you kept winging it. You tried to figure things out as you went, hoping the path would appear on its own, but it never does. Winging it destroys progress because it traps you in constant reaction mode. You spend your whole day responding to problems instead of preventing them. And when life hits you hard, which it always does, you crumble because you never built a plan strong enough to hold the weight. That's where people misunderstand me. They think planning means building some giant military-style operation for their daily life. It doesn't. I'm not asking you to write a 40-page briefing before breakfast. A simple daily mission plan will change your entire mental state. When you wake up knowing exactly what the target is, what your top objectives are, and what actions move the needle, the fog lifts, overwhelm fades, You stop feeling like the world is happening to you and you start happening to the world. But even when people try to plan, they still sabotage themselves. I see it every day. They overcomplicate the plan. They pack it with 20 tasks, color coded charts, apps, reminders, vision boards, and a dozen unrealistic goals. And after 1 or 2 days of failing to meet their own impossible expectations, they quit. Not because the plan was bad, but because the plan was bloated. A mission plan is supposed to simplify your life, not suffocate it. That's why I tell people one of the most important tricks I learned as a SEAL: plan in threes. 3 priorities for the day, 3 key actions that get you closer to the target, 3 non-negotiables that must be completed no matter what. Japanese military psychologists found that humans perform best when working in clusters of 3. More than that, the brain starts to lose clarity. Even in the teams, when things went sideways, and they always did, we relied on the rule of 3 to stay calm and execute. Planning in threes turns your day into something you can control, something you can win. And once you learn to win days, you learn to win weeks, then months, then entire chapters of your life. Suddenly, the enemy isn't adversity anymore. Adversity is predictable. You can train for it, prepare for it, even anticipate it. The real enemy is randomness, unfocused days, unmade decisions, disorganization disguised as flexibility. I want you to understand this clearly. Drifting is not harmless. It is a silent assassin. And the only way to defeat it is with structure, not rigid military structure, but simple, intentional planning that keeps you moving forward when everyone else is spinning in circles. People don't fail because life is too hard. They fail because they never planned for life at all. Once you grasp that, everything changes. When people come to me telling me they're overwhelmed, burned out, or stuck, I already know the root of the problem before they finish the sentence. Their goals are scattered, their attention is split, and their day feels like a battlefield with no map. Civilians love to brag about multitasking as if doing 10 things at once is some kind of badge of honor. In the SEAL teams, multitasking is a liability. It's how mistakes happen. It's how missions fall apart. And in everyday life, it's how your energy gets drained faster than any firefight ever could. A scattered mind leads to scattered results, and the danger isn't immediate like bullets flying, but it's just as real. You lose weeks, then months, then suddenly years to goals you never fully executed because you were too busy doing everything and finishing nothing. The deeper issue is that most goals fail long before people even start working on them. They fail because they're vague, emotional, and not executable. Someone says, "I want to get in shape." That's not a plan, that's a sentence. Another says, "I want to make more money." Great, but that's not a mission. That's a feeling. Feelings don't create progress. Execution does. And you cannot execute something you can't define. This is why people spin in circles even when they're highly motivated. They don't know what the actual target is, so every effort feels like running blindfolded. More effort, no results. When I was active duty, we used what I now teach civilians as the one-page mission plan. One page, not a binder, not a dashboard, not an app that sends alerts every 5 minutes, one single page. Why? Because clarity saves lives. When your environment is pure chaos and you're being hit with new information every second, you don't rise to your motivation. You fall to your level of clarity. A simple plan eliminates confusion because it forces you to define what you're trying to achieve, why it matters, and what steps actually move the mission forward. No fluff, no inspirational quotes, just precision. Researchers at Stanford found that when people reduce their task load and define their goals in concrete, actionable terms, their performance increases dramatically, sometimes by more than 40%. I didn't need Stanford to tell me that, but it's good for you to know that science backs it up. The brain craves simplicity under stress. The more complicated your plan is, the faster your mind abandons it. Even when people attempt to plan, they make one big mistake. They plan outcomes, not actions. Lose 20 pounds, start a business, fix my finances. These are destinations, not behaviors. That's like saying our mission is to eliminate the target without specifying how, when, with what resources, or under what conditions. You can't execute an outcome. You can only execute actions. Outcomes are a compass. Actions are the boots on the ground. That's why I teach one of my most important personal tricks. Reverse plan the day from the finish line. Before the day begins, I visualize the end of it. I ask myself, what would make today a win if I were looking back at it tonight? Then I reverse engineer the steps. Working backward creates instant clarity because it forces your brain to connect outcome to action, target to tactic, mission to movement. It's the exact method we used in the teams to ensure that every objective, from entry to exit, was coherent and executable. The one-page plan pulls everything together. It gives you a target, the reason behind it, the key actions for the day, the resources you need, the risks you must prepare for, and the after action notes you'll use to refine tomorrow. When your entire mission fits on one page, you stop drowning in complexity. You stop trying to multitask your way to success. Instead, you attack the right things in the right order with the right intensity. Clarity is power. And when you learn to think like a SEAL, simple, direct, deliberate, you'll realize you never needed more time or more motivation. You just needed a plan that could survive contact with the real world. People think Navy SEALs are machines, unbreakable, unshakable. But the truth is, I've seen discipline collapse in the field more times than I can count. Not because the men were weak, but because the mission pushed them into the darkest corners of their own minds. I remember one night in particular, dust in the air, comms cutting in and out, the kind of heat that makes every breath feel like a punishment. We had been moving for hours, no rest, no shade, no water left. I watched one of our strongest guys slow down, then stop, then look at me with eyes that said, "I'm done." In combat, that moment is more dangerous than any enemy. When discipline collapses, everything collapses: the mission, the team, your chance of getting home alive. People quit when their emotions drop. That's the real enemy. Not exhaustion, not fatigue, not even fear. It's the emotional crash, the point where your mind tells you the discomfort isn't worth it. Out here in the civilian world, it looks different. It's the moment you close the laptop because the work feels heavy. The moment you cancel the workout because you're not feeling it. The moment you break the promise you made to yourself simply because your mood dipped. You don't recognize it as danger, but it is. Every time you obey that emotion, you train yourself to quit. In the teams, we learn to override that signal with something I now call micro executions. These are tiny, immediate actions you take to keep the momentum alive when the mind starts to fracture. In combat, it might be adjusting your grip, scanning your sector, repeating the next step in the mission. In civilian life, it's sending the email, making the call, doing the first push up. Micro executions keep you moving when your mind wants you to stop. They shrink the battle to the next 5 seconds, and 5 seconds is manageable, even in hell. But the mistake most people make is relying on motivation to carry them through the hard parts. Motivation is a nice boost on good days, but it's worthless the moment stress enters the picture. I've never met a motivated man in the middle of a firefight. Motivation evaporates under pressure. Discipline is what remains. A Norwegian resilience study showed that high-performing soldiers didn't feel more motivated than the average recruits. Instead, they recovered faster after emotional drops. That's what resilience really is: the ability to restart quickly, not the ability to avoid stress. And that's why I teach one of my simplest but most powerful tools: the 3-breath reset. I've used this everywhere: during skydives, during raids, during the longest nights of my life, and even during normal days when life feels heavier than it should. When your mind starts to spiral, when your emotions start to dip, when you can feel the urge to quit rising like a tide, you stop everything for just 3 breaths. Inhale slowly, hold, exhale, repeat 3 times. It sounds almost too simple, but under stress, those 3 breaths reset the nervous system, pull you out of emotional chaos, and bring you back into the present moment where execution actually happens. This reset doesn't make the discomfort disappear. It makes it irrelevant. It gives you the space to take the next action instead of negotiating with your feelings. Pair that with the 40% rule: the understanding that when you think you're done, you're actually nowhere near your limit, and suddenly you have a mental weapon far stronger than motivation could ever be. I've watched men who were physically wrecked push through another mile, another hour, another life or death decision simply because they understood that their mind was lying to them. So when your day falls apart, when everything feels heavy, when your emotions crash and your energy collapses, understand this: nothing is wrong with you. You're not weak, you're human. But that moment is your battlefield, and what you do in that moment determines whether you rise or break. Discipline isn't built on good days. It's built in the moments when quitting whispers your name. And with the right tools, micro executions, the 40% rule, and the 3-breath reset, you can win that battle every single time. Most people don't realize they're trapped until they've lived the same year 3 or 4 times in a row. Same goals, same setbacks, same excuses, same promises that next week will be different. I've met entrepreneurs, athletes, parents, students, people from every walk of life who keep repeating the same mistakes without understanding why. And I can tell you exactly why it happens. You can't see your own blind spots. The enemy you can't see is the one that always hits you hardest. In the SEAL teams, blind spots get you killed. Out here, they kill your progress. They kill your confidence. They kill your potential. Not in one explosive moment: slowly, quietly, predictably. The psychological trap is simple. Your brain protects your ego by hiding the truth from you. When you mess up, you explain it away. When you break your promise to yourself, you justify it. When you fall short, you blame the schedule, the stress, the timing, the circumstances. Your mind builds a story that feels comforting in the moment, but destructive in the long term. You repeat the same behaviors because you never stop long enough to face them. You never examine the mechanics of your failure. And what you refuse to examine, you're doomed to repeat. In the teams, we had something that civilians rarely do, a system for breaking patterns before they could break us. We called it the after-action review. Every week, every mission, every training evolution, didn't matter if it was a disaster or a perfect execution, we reviewed what happened with brutal honesty. There were no excuses, no ego, no sugarcoating. We looked at what worked, what didn't, why it didn't, and what needed to change. It wasn't about blame, it was about precision. That system kept us evolving faster than the enemy could adapt. When I left the military, I realized this was one of the greatest tools anyone could ever use, regardless of their profession or lifestyle. A weekly after-action review stops the failure loop dead in its tracks because it gives you something you normally don't have: awareness. Not emotional awareness, operational awareness, the kind that takes your patterns, lays them out on the table, and forces you to confront the truth you've been avoiding. According to a Royal Marines training study, soldiers who reviewed their performance regularly improved nearly twice as fast as those who didn't. Same training, same environment. The difference wasn't physical ability, it was awareness. But here's where most people get AARs wrong. They review their results instead of their behavior. I didn't lose the weight. I didn't close the deal. I didn't finish the project. Results are the scoreboard, not the strategy. You can't reverse engineer a result. You have to reverse engineer the actions that created it or failed to create it. When you focus on outcomes, you judge yourself. When you focus on behavior, you improve yourself. That's why so many people never break the cycle. They're too busy obsessing over the scoreboard to study the plays. So I give people a simpler, more powerful way to run their weekly AAR. It's built on what I call the two brutally honest questions. These questions can cut through excuses faster than any therapist, coach, or motivational speaker. They are the same questions I ask myself in war zones, in training, and now in everyday life. The first question is, what did I do this week that moved me toward the mission? Not what I meant to do, not what I planned to do. What did I actually do? The second question is even harder. What did I do this week that held me back? This is where the truth comes out. This is where patterns reveal themselves. This is where you face the habits, the impulses, the fears, the laziness, the distractions that you pretend don't matter. When you answer these questions honestly, without excuses, without emotion, without fear of judgment, something powerful happens. The failure loop breaks. You stop repeating the same mistakes because you finally see them. You stop drifting because you understand the mechanics of your behavior. And you stop living the same year over and over because you gain the ability to adapt, just like we did in the field. Escaping mediocrity isn't about willpower or motivation. It's about clarity. It's about awareness. It's about being willing to treat your life like a mission instead of a guessing game. When you learn to review your actions with the same precision we used in the SEAL teams, you stop being a passenger in your own life. You start being the commander. And commanders don't repeat mistakes. They learn, they adapt, and they advance. If there's one thing I've learned after leaving the SEAL teams, it's that the most painful enemy civilians face isn't fear, stress, or hardship. It's time. Time is the enemy that sneaks past every defense you have. It doesn't kick in the door. It doesn't announce itself. It slips by quietly day after day until you wake up and realize an entire year disappeared while you told yourself you were waiting for the right moment. People think danger is dramatic. They think failure is loud. But the real danger is losing time without noticing. Living planless for another year means waking up a year older, no closer to your goals, no stronger, no clearer, no more disciplined than you were before. I've watched men frozen by fear on the battlefield, but I've watched far more civilians frozen by hesitation in their everyday lives. And hesitation is a slow death. But the good news, the hope, is that you don't need to change everything in your life to break this cycle. You only need to follow a mission, not mine, yours. The same system that kept me alive in combat, the same framework we use to execute under chaos works extraordinarily well for regular people living regular lives. When you operate with a mission, you move differently. You wake up with direction, you attack your day with purpose, you don't drift. You don't waste energy. You don't lose months to confusion or emotional storms. You become someone you can rely on. That's what following the mission system does. It gives you the clarity you've been missing. I created what I call the mission brief for civilians, specifically for people who want to live with more intention but don't know where to start. It's simple by design, because complexity kills execution. The mission brief has three components. First, define the target, the one thing that matters most this week. Second, identify your three mission actions, the steps that directly move you toward the target. Third, anticipate friction, what obstacles will try to stop you and how you'll respond. When you write this down, everything clicks into place. You know what matters, you know what to do, you know what to watch out for. You're not guessing anymore, you're executing. But even with the best mission, there's a mistake almost everyone makes. They quit too early, they don't stick with the system long enough for the momentum to build. In the teams, we used to say, the mission only fails when you stop moving. Civilians quit the moment progress slows, the moment emotions dip, the moment life gets heavy, and then they blame the plan instead of their patience. Progress is not a lightning strike. It's a grind, a rhythm, a deliberate march forward. And if you abandon the mission every time it stops feeling exciting, you guarantee you'll never reach the target. The plan doesn't fail, you stop following it. One of the oldest longevity studies from Okinawa suggests that people who maintain a simple daily purpose, even into their 90s, stay sharper, more active, and more resilient than those who drift. Purpose isn't a luxury, it's a survival tool. And planning is how you anchor your purpose into action. That's why one of the last tricks I teach people is deceptively small but tremendously powerful. Plan tomorrow before tonight ends. You decide the next day's mission while your mind is still clear, not when you're tired, not when you wake up overwhelmed. You build the map in advance. When you wake up, all you have to do is execute. This is exactly how we prepared for missions in the field. The night before, every variable is accounted for. You sleep knowing what tomorrow demands. You rise already focused. This is what Special Forces clarity really looks like. Not chaos, not adrenaline, not perfection, just intentional action repeated daily. When you follow the mission, when you commit to the system instead of your emotions, you stop living life on your heels. You step into each day like it's terrain you are meant to conquer. And the truth is, ordinary people who follow a mission become extraordinary, not because they're gifted, not because they're fearless, but because they are finally aligned. Their time, energy, decisions, and actions all move in the same direction.